everybody, so with the release of Halloween Kills this week, I thought it'd be a perfect time to actually do a ranking of all of the films. It's been a couple years since that last ranking I did back when 2018's Halloween came out, so I figured I've had a lot of time to rewatch a lot of these films, and some of my ranking probably has changed in the past. I do have my review up already for Halloween Kills if you do want to check that out after the ranking, just so you can get my more in-depth thoughts about the film. That's spoiler-free, of course. But like I said, I've been rewatching all the Halloween films leading up to this ranking. As a physical media collector, I have been rewatching all of the films. These are just the ones that I have on Blu-ray and 4K handy. I do need to get the new Scream Factory one, because those are on pre-order, but they haven't been delivered yet, so I can't show them off to you guys. But it's been a long franchise, 43 years in the making. There's been a lot of ups and downs in the franchise, which you would expect over the course of 40 years, but it's such a classic franchise. Multiple different timelines, various different divisive films in the Halloween franchise along the way, so make sure you share your ranking before I get into my ranking, because that's part of the fun of this, having the conversation with you guys, sharing your rankings down below, because we're all horror fans here. Some of us are definitely going to have picks that we don't agree on. Let's do our best to be civil here, but make sure you share those before we get into my number 12 pick, dead last in the Halloween franchise. At number 12, I have Halloween Resurrection. This just feels like a huge slap in the face to all the Halloween fans, especially after that epic finale we had in H2O is now just completely ruined, and all of Laurie's arc is ruined as she's killed off. H2O was the perfect finale, but of course they had to keep the money train rolling, and this time around, Resurrection just feels like a very bland and lazy entry in the franchise. Rick Rosenthal returns to the series again after directing Halloween 2, and he just is not able to evoke the vibes of the series that we know, choosing instead to lump this into the more early 2000s tropey kind of horror films vibes, with college students entering the Myers house for a reality show, Dangertainment, hosted by Busta Rhymes. Don't get me wrong, I love Busta Rhymes, but I don't know what he was doing in Halloween Resurrection. He's out here roundhousing Michael Myers. Like, just that scene alone perfectly sums up what's wrong with this film. Everything about Halloween Resurrection is just very bland and generic. The scares aren't there, the kills aren't memorable. The only thing I'll give this film credit for is I actually do quite like the mask in the film for Michael Myers, but it's just a shame that it's wasted on such a really bad movie. We've had some pretty bad Michael Myers masks in the past, so it's just one of those things I do have to prop up the film for. We'll get into some of the other bad Michael Myers masks along the way. At number 11, I have Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. Much like in Halloween Resurrection, 5 also ignores the ending of the previous film, completely disregarding that Jamie seemingly is taking up the killer mantle from Michael Myers and replacing it with this weird supernatural angle. Out of all of the Halloween films that involve the Cult of Thorn storyline, this is most definitely my least favorite among them. There's just not very much to Halloween 5. Everyone feels like they're on autopilot. The plot is extremely scarce, almost non-existent even. And also the fact that Halloween 5 probably has some of my least favorite kills in the entire franchise. Speaking of worse in the franchise, look at Michael Myers in this movie. He looks absolutely terrible. What the hell did they do to his mask? His neck flaps are all out. It just looks downright disgusting, and like not a good way kind of disgusting like you would expect from a Halloween film. The film just gives me nothing to latch onto. The story is boring as all hell. The characters are completely unlikable, especially Tina, who's probably one of the most irritating characters of any horror film. Jamie's barely even in this one, and for the most part she's mute throughout the entire film, and Loomis is just a weird creep throughout the movie. So all in all, I really do kind of struggle back and forth between, is this my least favorite film? Is it Halloween Resurrection? But right at this moment in time, I do think it is a huge step down from Halloween 4, and this kind of was the start of the downfall of the Halloween films for a while, depending on how you feel about the later on sequels. At number 10, I have Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. After his first film, you can definitely see that he's trying his best to not just remake Halloween 2 and make his own wild and different version. It's very out there conceptually, the supernatural aspects when it comes to Michael's ghost mother and this white horse that we see all throughout the film. And we continue on with the grimy, brutal nature of everything in the film, especially the Michael Myers portrayed in this, with this absolutely massive man, this hobo-looking Michael Myers with this massive beard. Not a big fan of the mask. If Halloween 5 Michael Myers didn't exist, this will probably be my least favorite look among all the other looks in the franchise. I do actually have a lot of respect for Rob Zombie as a filmmaker. I do actually quite enjoy some of the films in his filmography. I do have to respect him also for the fact that this is very fresh and different amongst all the other films in the franchise, but it just didn't work for me when it comes to it being a Halloween film. There are a lot of interesting ideas in the film, but it's just a confusing mess of them, and it's very muddled, and none of them are really fully realized by the end of the film. I think with a little bit more polishing all around with this, I think it could have been a much better film as a whole, but for the most part, this is one of the more disappointing entries for me, at least. At number 9, I have Rob Zombie's Halloween. As far as remakes go, there is stuff in this I do enjoy. I'm generally quite favorable when it comes to zombie style filmmaking, and I think it does work in his approach in the first film more than it does in the sequel. The last third or so of the film, where it's a more stylized version of Carpenter's original with his absolutely massive Michael Myers terrorizing people, that's where I think the film definitely hit its stride. Even if the films are kind of so-so to me, I do love Tyler Maine's portrayal of Michael Myers, this big, bulky, 6'9" man. It's pretty intimidating. Where the film unfortunately does lose me though is the whole origin story when it comes to Michael Myers and his broken home past. It just takes up way too much of the film's runtime. It's overly long, unnecessary, and it isn't helped by the fact that there's not really great dialogue exchanges throughout the film. Of course, there's not really great dialogue in general. I don't think Rob Zombie's really great when it comes to dialogue exchanges. But when Zombie does focus more on the horror aspects, I think he does do a great job with that, especially when we're in the asylum in the second act or so, building up the evil more and more as we get more scenes between him and Dr. Loomis. I actually quite like Malcolm McDowell's performance as Dr. Loomis. He's such a great actor. It's just a shame the movies around him aren't that great. This definitely isn't one of the worst horror remakes by any means. There are a lot of really bad horror remakes that I could go on and on about that I think are a lot worse than this one. So it's an okay remake in my opinion. At number 8, I have Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. This is one of those films in the Halloween franchise that a lot of fans are very split on, especially with all the different studio interference involved with it, whether it be the theatrical cut, the producer's cut. All of that, it's very clear how much of a mess the film is as we continue the Cult of Thorns storyline. But to be completely honest, The Curse of Michael Myers is kind of a guilty pleasure kind of film for me. Yes, the story is an absolute mess. The whole storyline angle where Michael has this weird nephew-son kind of situation. But all in all, I think that 6 has some great atmosphere, and the kills in 6 are what saves it a lot for me because they have some pretty awesome kills all around. As I think the Michael Myers portrayal in part 6 is actually quite underrated. Looking back, I do find some humor in that Paul Rudd is portraying Tommy Doyle in this. He's not great in the role, but it's just fun to just see him in this role and see where he ends up going in his career. And while Donald Pleasance is still kind of a little bit all over the place when it comes to his portrayal as Dr. Loomis, I think it is a little bit of a step up in this compared to part 5. It's one of those situations that makes you wonder if there wasn't all the studio interference, could this film have been a lot better? But I guess if there is a bright side, we did get H2O after this. At number 7, I have Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. I've actually never really hated Season of the Witch all that much. It does have that kind of stigma around it as the Halloween film that doesn't have Michael Myers in it. But I think if you separate it from the fact that it's in the same franchise, I think you could actually have a lot of fun with this film in the right mindset because it is just a campy 80s film all around. It is an extremely goofy product of the time, but there is a charm to it when it comes to Tom Atkins taking on this cult company that wants to turn kids' heads into snakes and bugs with Halloween masks. That's a pretty dark concept when you really think about it in the grand scheme, especially when it's contrasted with that Silver Shamrock theme that's catchy as hell, and I'm probably going to be thinking about it all day now. But as long as you accept this as its own thing, I think you can have a lot of fun with this. It's just the fact that it's also in the Halloween franchise is why it's kind of just one of those iffy kind of situations. At number 6, I have Halloween 2. The original follow-up to the first film, that's quite an act to follow, but I do think this is a solid follow-up all around. Continuing on the story from the first film with Laurie going to the hospital, it definitely has that Halloween vibe, but it does feel very paint by numbers. Horror here mainly is confined to the hospital as Loomis is running around. I wish that Jamie Lee Curtis was actually able to do a lot more in the film because she is mostly confined to her hospital bed while Michael is going around killing everyone in the hospital, but I do actually think the kills themselves are quite good. They're much more gory and bloody this time around, which is a departure from the original film because there really wasn't that in the first film. This also is the film that introduces the whole twist that Michael and Laurie Strode are siblings, which I've never been overly fond of. But yeah, I think this is a solid follow-up to the original film. You could definitely watch this first film and the second film back to back, and it's kind of like a really fun, long movie. But, it's not canon anymore, so it is what it is. At number 5, I have Halloween H2O, 20 years later. After the ups and downs of the Thorn trilogy, we ignore those films and go back to basics when it comes to the stuff in the franchise that we all know and love, which is Laurie Strode. The overall portrayal of Michael Myers in this film isn't one of my favorites. I don't think it's terrible by any means, but it's definitely not great. The CGI mask scene aside, I do think that is kind of hilarious, though. I did really enjoy the story a lot this time around in H2O. There is a decent amount of meta humor in H2O that's kind of common in the post-Scream era, especially the fact that Kevin Williamson was the producer on the film and also one of the uncredited writers. Some of that stuff I do still find funny after all these years, but after multiple rewatches, it just doesn't hold up as much. What makes this film so great is the return of Jamie Lee Curtis in the role of Laurie Strode. The path that we take Laurie's arc in H2O as she's facing off against Michael Myers in the epic final act is such a great payoff for fans of the franchise. It's just a shame that they kind of ruined it in the next film, but it's such an awesome ending. Imagine if I saw this in theaters when it came out originally. It would have been cheers in the theater as he's getting his head chopped off by an axe. Number 4, I have Halloween 2018. The most recent continuity that we're following right now with the Blumhouse films. I do really love the return of Laurie Strode and her arc in H2O. I do think that 2018's Halloween does it just a little bit better, delving a bit more into her trauma as she's become this quiet, secluded person planning non-stop for Michael's return one day, and how all of that paranoia has affected generations of her family. Also just fantastic filmmaking on display from David Gordon Green. I think he has been one of the better directors in the franchise. Never in a million years would I expect David Gordon Green and Danny McBride to make such a great combo when it comes to these Blumhouse horror films, but they've been doing a great job with the Halloween franchise so far, at least in my opinion. Also been able to bring back something that's been sorely missing from a lot of the Halloween sequels, and it's the evil allure of Michael Myers in general, and just being able to craft some really invigorating, fun slasher moments along the way. Now, it's not a perfect film. There are some frustrating elements along the way, especially the Dr. Sartan stuff that I just think is absolutely terrible in the film, but it is a film that I can definitely rewatch multiple times. It never gets old. It's something that I pop in a lot as far as rotation goes when it comes to all the Halloween sequels. At number 3, I have Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. With everyone in the mainstream mainstream being mad that Michael Myers wasn't in Season of the Witch, we do have a great reintroduction to his character in the 4th installment. This is one of the installments I think has some of the best Michael Myers horror in it. The mask that Michael wears in the film is distracting a little bit because it is so clean and goofy looking. All of the spooky stuff surrounding Michael Myers in the film I do think helps elevate it at least a little bit. Especially when comparing this to Halloween 1 and 2, I do think this is a departure in direction, but I do think overall it is a solid one. We do embrace a lot more of the self-awareness in the Halloween franchise this time around, which I know not everyone is a fan of, but I do love the addition of Jamie as Michael's niece. I really like Danielle Harris's portrayal. It just sucks that she really didn't get too much to do in the 5th film, and then she's not even in the 6th film at all. But Donald Pleasence's return to the franchise is one of the best elements of this sequel after seemingly blowing up in Halloween 2. I think outside of the first film in the franchise, this is probably his best performance among all the sequels. It's just such a perfect blend of entertainment and scares in this installment. Also the fact that he's being hunted down by a militia, which is kind of the predecessor to what happens in Halloween Kills. All around, it's just a really great spooky movie. I do even like the twist that we have in the end of the film with Jamie seemingly taking up the killer mantle. It just sucks that we kind of just ignored it for the rest of the series. Number 2, I have Halloween Kills, the most recent installment in the franchise. I don't want to get too in-depth with the film here because I do have the full review that you can go check out for my full thoughts, but what an intense thrill ride of a sequel. This sequel is absolutely bloody and brutal, but I also love the way that we explore trauma in the town of Haddonfield when it comes to Michael Myers, and also Jamie Lee Curtis's character Laurie Strode once again. She is an absolute force, but I do love a lot of the other performances in the film as well. This kind of suffer from the fact that it is the middle film in a trilogy of films, so it doesn't have a completely satisfying conclusion to it without going into too many details, but it's still a bloody awesome time in the theater. I highly recommend you check out this sequel when you get a chance because it checks all the boxes if you're a huge fan of the Halloween franchise. At number 1, Halloween, the original film. I know, quite a shocker there, but there really isn't too much to say that hasn't already been said about why this film is such a classic, especially in the horror genre. It takes this very simple concept and crafts just the perfect film that encapsulates the Halloween season with its effectively scary and chilly filmmaking. Michael Myers is just a very fascinating character as a whole, and Carpenter does a great job building up the suspense around his character in the film. Whether you know him as the Shape or the Boogeyman, he just works great as almost a sort of beacon of evil, especially with his iconic look that he has. Also, just as a film, it's iconic because of the amazing soundtrack done by John Carpenter and just the great directing all around as well. Of course, Jamie Lee Curtis and Donald Pleasence are the big standouts here acting-wise, but I do think Donald Pleasence is the best part of this film when it comes to the acting. He's kind of just the perfect foil for Michael Myers, and in the way that he describes the character to us, the audience, it makes him even more chilling. Even after dozens of rewatches of the first film over the years, it just holds up. It's timeless, and it's a classic for a reason. And it was the birth of the slasher genre as a whole and popularized it. We did have like a couple handful along the way, like Black Christmas, but Halloween is the big golden standout of that and why we have so many great horror films today because of it. Even after 43 years, the film is still talked about as one of the best horror films of all time, so that's how you know it has some real staying power. And there you have it, my new updated ranking for all the Halloween films from worst to best. It's been a lot of fun actually delving back into the entire series as a whole, rewatching the films, because some of my opinions do change every now and then. I think my opinions may change on some of them, especially by the time we get Halloween Ends not that long from now, because we don't have to wait too long, thankfully, for the next installment. Now that you've heard my new ranking for the Halloween franchise, make sure you share yours down below in the comments section. How would you rank the franchise from worst to best when it comes to all of these different entries? There's a lot of different films in the franchise, so I think there's going to be a lot of different answers down below. Even if you haven't seen Halloween Kills, I would love to know your ranking, but if you have seen it, even better, to make sure you add it down there in the comment section. Where would you rank it among all the different films? And as I said before, I do have a review up for Halloween Kills if you do want to check that out. But thank you guys so much for checking my ranking of the films. It's been a blast to put this together and talk about the films with you guys. If you haven't already, make sure you leave a like and also subscribe to the channel so you're up to date with all my movie reviews, show reactions, unboxings, and more on the channel. But next time, I'll see you guys later.